to me reeks of a team that is being too desperate and not appreciating the value of some of the parts on their team. You're talking about moving on from Garland in exchange for an expiring James Harden contract. And the reason that you're doing so is to get over the hump in the with the self-awareness, the lack thereof of doing that, to bring in that guy to help get you over the hump. That's an incredible thing to start with. And then, going back to DeAndre Hunter, you're moving on from him to bring in Ellis and Schroeder. I wouldn't have done that deal either because I think DeAndre Hunter is better than those two players. I think that Darius Garland is an asset. If you're an organization that's positioning yourself for the future beyond whatever happens during this run, I think it's careless by Cleveland to act this way. And I don't feel better about them for giving up players, in the case of DeAndre Hunter, a player that's better than what you got in return because he might not be as good of a positional fit than the guys that you're bringing back in return. I think Cleveland, I feel worse about them now than I did a week ago, even though they're viewed as the favorites in the Eastern Conference.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I mean, I think where the root of our disagreement is I view Darius Garland as a distressed asset. I view Darius Garland as a guy that isn't somebody that was going to net you some sort of brilliant return if he was traded individually. It matched from a salary standpoint. You get better. He's 26, yes. But I think if you're Cleveland, it's about right now. If you're the Cavs, it's about maximizing your opportunity to win the title right now because you don't have Donovan Mitchell locked up long term. You got to do whatever you can to prove to him, hey, this is where you should want to play long term. And I know there's the LeBron James rumor out there right now.
That would
it's a rumor.
Hey, let's bring LeBron back.
But it's a rumor.
It's a rumor to suggest Donovan Mitchell might leave.
Right, but if you're an organization, you got to move with some foresight here. You can't acquire a LeBron James until the offseason. You could acquire James Harden right now and improve your chances in a very weak Eastern Conference to represent the East in the finals. I look at it from a defensive standpoint, and I'm not sitting up here pretending like James Harden is some all-world defender, but at 6'5", he's bigger than 6'1" Darius Garland, who was a total liability the past 2 years in the postseason, a guy that's constantly been hunted out by opposing offenses to get put in the action because he's too small. And I think you're very much sleeping on the impact of Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder. Those are two dudes. Keon Ellis, by the way, if you're a casual basketball fan, he has been stuck in basketball Siberia the past couple of years playing with the Sacramento Kings, a guy that can shoot the hell out of the ball from the perimeter, has the toughness and physicality that, quite frankly, Cleveland's lacked over the past couple of years in the postseason.
Right, but if you have Keon Ellis, who's not a smaller guard, then why do you need to get rid of Darius Garland, who is a 20-point-per-game scorer most seasons in the NBA, when you just brought in a bigger guard who can defend?
Because they view James Harden as an upgrade over Darius Garland. And I think the rest of the NBA's got to view it that way.
Right, but if you're going to play the game that Donovan Mitchell might be off your basketball team and you need to prepare as such, well, then shouldn't the same logic apply to if James Harden, he's not going to be on your basketball team next year either? He's an expiring contract, and Darius Garland is a 26-year-old averaging close to 20 points per game in his career in the NBA. And that, to me, reeks of short-sightedness. And that's my problem, where you're in your title contending window, so then you panic. And you're like, oh, we got to do something. We got to do it right now. And we're going to give away DeAndre Hunter, who's a better player than the two guys that we're bringing back. And we're going to give away a 26-year-old. Like, just think, let's go back in time to October versions of ourselves and try to imagine how these trades would have been perceived if they were made 3-4 months ago. If anybody thought on planet Earth it would make sense to move on from Darius Garland going into the year for an expiring James Harden contract at his year, the Cavaliers would be ripped. But because of what the last couple of months have been, I think there's a short-sightedness where, there's some injury concerns and a few weeks of bad play that we're going to weigh that heavier than the larger sample of what Garland's been in his career.
Josh, but this is my whole thing. I don't agree with what you just said. There's never been a world where Darius Garland's better than James Harden.
A better asset, though. 25-year-old Darius Garland versus 35-year-old James Harden on an expiring deal is a more valuable player, a 20-point-per-game scorer in his mid-20s.
He's more valuable. He's more valuable if you're playing my GM mode on 2K in terms of like winning games in April. Give me James Harden.
I also hate the way James Harden plays basketball.
I get that.
Watching
a lot of people
a dude trying to draw fouls and then also quitting on your team multiple times, especially when it's someone who's looked out for you multiple times in Daryl Morey's case. Sorry.
Daryl Morey also lied to James Harden and told him he was going to give him an extension that he did not give him. And that's why James Harden went across to Shanghai and called Daryl Morey a liar in front of a group of Chinese high school kids.
Denton Day, split the tie. Where are you at when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers, what they've done over the last week?
Of this thing, but you're putting way too much stock into Darius Garland. Like way too much.
I just don't put a lot of stock into James Harden.
Yeah, but you're doing this thing where you're calling him like this massive asset. For what?
It's a better asset than James Harden, is the point I'm making.
But what is that asset going to be used for?
Well, the offseason, if you don't make the playoffs and lose Donovan Mitchell, now what? Figure out a way to get something in return.
My whole thing is if you're losing Donovan Mitchell, I'm blowing it up and trading Darius Garland anyway. It's not like he's going to be the guy that is left in Cleveland to be the guy that leads the charge of us entering our rebuild.
You hear that? You remember that Tom Moore quote? RIP to the legend Tom Moore, where somebody asked him, "Hey, why don't you guys give Peyton Manning's backups reps?" And Tom Moore said, "If Peyton Manning is not in, we are effed, and we do not practice being effed." I think Cleveland is in the same position where we're not going to practice being effed. If Mitchell is not staying, which I think Donovan Mitchell is going to stay, but if Mitchell is not staying, then this whole thing is getting blown up. So it doesn't really matter. We might as well go all in.
I have Tom Moore's. I can just grab. I'm a big fan of Tom Moore. Let's get to a couple calls on the way out here. 310-840-4910 if you want in. Let's go to Brandy, who's calling from Vegas. Vegas. What do you nominate for American sports rivalry, Brandy?
Best sports rivalry. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so I'm going to have to go Washington, Dallas, NFL rivalry. Only the Redskins, Commanders, but great players came out of that rivalry. You had legendary players like Blake Ferguson, Billy Gilmore at quarterback, Art Monk, Hall of Fame wide receiver, played for the Redskins, and then Dallas, Roger Staubach, Danny White, great receiver, Drew Pearson. I remember that Monday night game where Darryl Green ran down on Monday Night Football, a legendary play. And Ron Springs played for running back for the Dallas Cowboys. And his son, Sean Springs, played for the Redskins. So great players coming out of that rivalry. I think it's the biggest rivalry in sports.
I appreciate it, Randy. You're in D.C.
Back in
you didn't even bring up Cowboys. Redskins.
No, because with all due respect to Brandy, like the rivalry, it can't be lopsided to be called a rivalry. And the two franchises have been so irrelevant over the span of the last 30 years that, like, I don't know. I would, what's a bigger rivalry to me than Commanders and Cowboys? A bigger rivalry is probably Commanders. That rivalry in particular, and I know that there's the rich tradition and history of that rivalry, but if we're talking about recently, in terms of the two franchises that have been relevant, that have played meaningful football games against each other, I think Washington and Philadelphia are bigger rivalry.
Let's go back out to the Midwest. Anthony is in Illinois. Anthony, you're on West Williams tonight with your nomination for the best